I stared at the permission slip in my hand, the one for the 8th grade field trip to the science center. It needed a parent signature. Such a simple thing. I walked into the kitchen where my mom was scrolling through her phone, coffee growing cold beside her. "Mom, can you sign this? It's due tomorrow," and the slap came out of nowhere. My head snapped to the side. The paper fluttered to the floor. My cheek exploded in burning pain that radiated through my whole face. For a second, I couldn't process what had just happened. Couldn't understand why my mother's hand had just connected with my face hard enough to leave ringing in my ears. Then she was screaming. "Do I look like I have time for this? Do I look like I have money for field trips and permission slips and your constant needing? You're 13 years old, Maya. 13. Figure it out yourself. You're grown now. You hear me? Grown. Act like it." She grabbed her purse from the counter, still yelling, words that blurred together into a wall of anger I couldn't fully process. Something about bills. Something about being tired. Something about me always wanting something from her. Then she stormed out of the kitchen and slammed her bedroom door so hard the dishes in the cabinet rattled. I stood there frozen, hand pressed to my burning cheek, staring at the permission slip on the linoleum floor. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears. Grown. That word hung in the air like smoke after a fire, choking me, changing something fundamental in the atmosphere of my life. I was 13 years old. I had braces. I still slept with a stuffed animal sometimes. I'd just started wearing a training bra. I watched cartoons on Saturday mornings and did my homework at the kitchen table and asked my mom to help me with my hair for school pictures. But according to her, I was grown now. I bent down slowly and picked up the permission slip. Stared at the blank line where a parent's signature was supposed to go. Felt something inside me crack and reshape into something harder, something that understood I was alone in a way I'd never been before. My mom didn't come out of her room that night. Not to apologize. Not to check on me. Not to say she didn't mean it or that she was just stressed or that she loved me. Nothing. I made myself a peanut butter sandwich for dinner. Did my homework alone at the table. Went to bed with my cheek still throbbing and my mind trying to make sense of what grown was supposed to mean. I kept thinking she'd come to my room. Kept thinking she'd sit on the edge of my bed like she used to when I was younger, stroke my hair, tell me she was sorry, tell me she loved me, tell me we'd figure it out together. I fell asleep waiting for her. When I woke up the next morning, there was a note on the kitchen counter in her messy handwriting, "Had to leave early for work. Make yourself breakfast. Don't be late for school." No mention of the slap. No mention of what she'd said. Like it never happened at all. But it did happen. And something in me had shifted permanently in those few seconds of violence and those devastating words. I never thought I'd tell this story. For years, I convinced myself it wasn't that bad, that other kids had it worse, that I was being dramatic. I had a roof over my head, didn't I? Food in the fridge, most of the time. Clothes that fit, mostly. I wasn't being beaten every day. I wasn't living on the streets. But what I've learned since then, what took me years of therapy to understand, is that neglect is its own kind of violence. Being told you're grown when you're still a child, being forced to raise yourself while the person who's supposed to protect you actively chooses not to, that leaves scars too. Different scars. Invisible ones. The kind people actually praise you for later. You're so mature for your age. You're so independent. You're so responsible. Nobody asks why a child needed to become mature. Nobody questions why a kid had to learn independence so young. Nobody wonders what it cost to be that responsible. My name is Maya. I'm 26 years old now. And I need to tell you about the 13 years between that slap and this moment. I need to tell you what happens when a parent decides their child is grown before that child has any right to be. I need to tell you about the price of being forced to become your own parent. Because that word, grown, it wasn't a gift. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't even accurate. It was an abandonment dressed up in expectations I couldn't possibly meet. Before that day in the kitchen, before the slap and the word that changed everything, my life wasn't perfect, but it was still recognizable as childhood. There were problems, sure. Big ones, looking back with adult eyes. But I was still allowed to be a kid most of the time. My father left when I was 3. I don't remember him at all. Just a name on my birth certificate, Daniel Crawford, and a few photographs my mom kept in a shoebox in her closet that I'd sneak looks at sometimes, trying to find my own features in his face. He was tall, had my same dark eyes, my same thick hair. That's all I could tell. Mom never talked about him except to say he was no good, that he'd left us with nothing, that we were better off without him. Maybe she was right. I don't know. But his absence created a vacuum in our lives that seemed to suck all the oxygen out of everything. Mom, Diane, worked 2 jobs for as long as I could remember. During the week, she was a receptionist at a dental office, answering phones and filing insurance claims. Weekends and some evenings, she cleaned houses for rich families in the nicer part of town. She was always tired. Always stressed. Always counting money that never seemed to be enough. Our apartment was small, a 2-bedroom in a complex that had seen better days. The carpet was stained, the walls thin enough that we could hear our neighbors' fights and their TV and their footsteps at all hours. But it was home. My room was tiny, barely big enough for my bed and a small dresser, but I'd decorated it with posters from magazines and drawings I'd done, and it felt like mine. Before 13, before everything changed, Mom still tried to be a parent. I can see that now. She wasn't good at it, wasn't natural at it, was drowning in ways I was too young to understand. But she tried. She'd braid my hair on Sunday nights while we watched movies together on the couch, her fingers working through the tangles while I sat between her knees. She'd help me with my homework when she wasn't too exhausted, leaning over my shoulder to check my math problems or quiz me on spelling words. She'd kiss my forehead before bed and tell me she loved me, even on the days when I could tell she was barely holding it together. Those moments were islands of warmth in an increasingly cold sea. But even then, even before the breaking point, there were signs. Cracks in the foundation that I didn't recognize as dangerous because I had nothing to compare them to. She'd forget to pick me up from school sometimes. I'd wait outside with the teachers for an hour, sometimes 2, until she'd finally show up full of apologies and excuses about traffic or losing track of time or her shift running late. Eventually, I just started walking home by myself, even though it was almost 2 miles and I was supposed to be too young to do it alone. She'd disappear on weekends occasionally. Just gone when I woke up Saturday morning, no note, no explanation. I'd spend the day alone in the apartment, watching TV and making sandwiches and trying not to be scared. She'd come back Sunday night or Monday morning, sometimes looking happy, sometimes looking worse than when she left. I learned not to ask where she'd been. She started treating me less like her daughter and more like her friend, or maybe her therapist. I was 10, 11, 12 years old, sitting on the edge of her bed or at the kitchen table, listening to her complain about her bosses or her coworkers or the bills or the men she sometimes dated. You understand, don't you, Maya? You're so smart. You get it. I didn't get it. Not really. I was a child listening to adult problems I had no framework to process. But I'd nod and say the things I thought she wanted to hear because making her feel better seemed important, seemed like my job somehow. You're right, Mom. They don't appreciate you. He sounds like a jerk, Mom. You deserve better. It'll be okay, Mom. We'll figure it out. We. Like I was her partner in navigating life instead of her child who needed her to navigate it for me. Looking back now with years of therapy and distance and understanding, I can see what was happening. She was parentifying me, the technical term Dr. Williams taught me later. Shifting the weight of emotional labor onto my small shoulders gradually, bit by bit, so that neither of us noticed until it was too heavy for me to put down. She'd tell me about her latest breakup in detail no child should hear. About the guy who'd cheated on her, or the one who'd borrowed money and never paid it back, or the one who'd said he loved her and then disappeared. I was 11 years old hearing about adult betrayal and heartbreak and sexual dysfunction, nodding along like I understood, like this was normal. Men are all the same, Maya. They take what they want and leave. Don't ever depend on a man for anything. You hear me? Yes, Mom. You're the only one I can trust. The only one who doesn't let me down. The pressure of being her only source of emotional support was crushing, but I didn't know that yet. I thought it meant she loved me. Thought it meant I was special. Thought it was normal for a kid to be their parents' confidant and support system. By the time I was 12, I was cooking dinner most nights because Mom came home too exhausted from working both jobs. Nothing fancy, just boxed mac and cheese or spaghetti or grilled cheese sandwiches, but it was my responsibility now. She'd eat whatever I made, sometimes barely looking up from her phone, sometimes offering a distracted thanks, baby, before retreating to her room. I was doing my own laundry because she didn't have time. Figuring out my own school schedule and parent-teacher conferences and permission slips. Making my own breakfast and packing my own lunch and getting myself to school on time. But I was still a child. Still needed help with things. Still needed a parent to lean on when things got hard. Still needed someone to sign a permission slip for a field trip. That's what I was asking for that day in the kitchen. Such a small thing. A signature. 30 seconds of her time. And instead, I got a slap and a word that redefined my entire existence. Grown. After she slammed her bedroom door that day, I stood in the kitchen for what felt like hours. The permission slip was still on the floor. My cheek was still burning. My mind was trying to process what had just happened and failing completely. Part of me wanted to knock on her door, to apologize even though I didn't know what I was apologizing for, to make it better somehow. Part of me wanted to scream and cry and demand an explanation. Part of me just wanted her to come out and take it back, to say she didn't mean it, to be my mom again. I did none of those things. I picked up the permission slip. Folded it carefully. Put it in my backpack. Made myself a peanut butter sandwich even though I wasn't hungry. Sat at the kitchen table and did my math homework while silent tears ran down my face and dripped onto the page. Went to bed early, still waiting for her to come apologize. She never did. The next morning, her note on the counter was so casual, so normal, that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Almost convinced myself the slap hadn't happened, the words hadn't been said. But my cheek still hurt. And when I looked in the bathroom mirror, I could see the faint outline of her fingers in a red mark across my face. I went to school. Turned in all my other homework. When my teacher, Mrs. Patterson, asked for the permission slips for the field trip, I said I forgot mine at home. "Do you want to call your mom to bring it?" she asked kindly. Something in me recoiled at the idea. No. It's okay. I don't really want to go anyway. Are you sure? It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to the science center, remember? You love science. I did love science. But I loved it less than I feared calling my mother and asking her for something else, risking another explosion, another slap, another confirmation that I was asking too much just by existing. I'm sure. I have stuff to do that day anyway. Mrs. Patterson looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe. Or suspicion. But she didn't push. Just made a note on her clipboard and moved on to the next student. That was the first of many things I'd learned to do without. The weeks after that day blurred together into a new reality that didn't feel real at all. Mom stopped pretending. That's the only way I can describe it. Before, even when she was overwhelmed or absent or treating me more like a friend than a daughter, there was still some performance of motherhood. Still some gesture toward the role she was supposed to play. After, she just stopped. She stopped cooking entirely. Before, she'd at least make dinner once or twice a week, even if it was just heating up frozen pizza or throwing together a salad. Now, nothing. The kitchen was mine to figure out. She stopped helping with homework. Stopped asking about school. Stopped coming to parent-teacher conferences. The school would send home notices about meetings or events that required parents, and she'd glance at them and toss them in the trash. Handle it yourself, she'd say if I tried to ask her about something school-related. You're smart. You don't need me for that. She stopped checking on me at all. Stopped asking if I'd eaten or done my homework or if everything was okay. I became furniture in my own home. Useful when needed for something, invisible otherwise. She'd leave money on the counter sometimes. $20 here, $15 there, never with a note or explanation. Just cash left like a tip for services rendered. Make that last, she'd say if she caught me picking it up. I don't get paid again until Friday. I was 13 years old, trying to figure out how to make $20 cover groceries for a week. Learning which stores had the cheapest bread, the cheapest peanut butter, the cheapest eggs. Learning to calculate unit prices and compare brands and stretch every dollar until it screamed. I'd stand in the grocery store aisle with a calculator on my phone, adding up items, putting things back when the total got too high. Rice. Beans. Pasta. Cheap protein when I could afford it. Ramen noodles when I couldn't. Other kids my age were buying snacks and sodas and whatever they wanted. I was doing mental math to figure out if I could afford both cereal and milk or if I had to choose one. The school counselor, Mr. Harrison, noticed I was losing weight. Called me into his office one day during lunch period. Maya, I wanted to check in with you. Some of your teachers have expressed concern. They say you seem distracted lately. Tired. Is everything okay at home? I'd already learned the script by then. Already knew what to say to make adults stop asking questions. Everything's fine. Just busy with school stuff. Trying to keep my grades up. Are you eating enough? You look thinner than you did at the start of the year. I'm fine. Just growing, I guess. You know how it is. He didn't look convinced, but what could he do? I wasn't showing up with bruises. Wasn't reporting abuse. Wasn't asking for help. I was just quietly drowning while telling everyone I was fine. Well, if you ever need to talk, my door is always open. About anything. School, home, whatever. Thanks, Mr. Harrison. I appreciate it. I left his office and went back to class, and he never called me in again. I'd said the magic words. I'm fine. Everything's fine. And maybe he believed me, or maybe he just had too many other students with more obvious problems to worry about a girl who was good at hiding hers. At home, the emotional distance between my mother and me grew wider every day. She started dating someone new. His name was Marcus. He was loud and opinionated and seemed to take up all the space in our small apartment whenever he was there. Which was often. He moved in about 6 weeks after they started dating. Nobody asked me how I felt about it. Nobody mentioned that my life was being upended by this stranger who now had a key to our apartment and an opinion about everything I did. Why is she always here? I heard him ask my mom one night when they thought I was asleep. My room shared a wall with the living room, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear everything. She lives here, Marcus. She's my daughter. I know she's your daughter. I'm just saying, doesn't she have friends or something? Somewhere else to be? Feels crowded with her always around. Always around. In my own home. She's fine, Mom said, her voice taking on that defensive edge I'd learned to recognize. She stays in her room mostly. You barely even notice her. You barely even notice her. Her own mother, describing her daughter as furniture to her boyfriend. I pulled my pillow over my head and tried not to cry, tried not to make any noise that would prove I was listening, that would confirm I existed at all. Marcus noticed me, though. In ways I desperately didn't want. He'd make comments when Mom wasn't around. Little things. Nothing I could point to as definitely wrong, but enough to make my skin crawl. You're getting curves, huh? Turning into a little woman. Your mama was built like you at your age. Looking good, Maya. He'd let his eyes linger too long when I walked through the living room. Would find excuses to be in the hallway when I was going to the bathroom. Would stand too close when we passed each other in the kitchen. I started changing my entire routine to avoid him. Would wait until I heard him leave for work before coming out of my room in the morning. Would stay at school as long as possible, joining every club and activity that would keep me away from home. Would wear baggy clothes and keep my eyes down and make myself as small and invisible as possible. I tried to tell Mom once. Just once. We were alone in the kitchen, a rare moment without Marcus there. She was making coffee, getting ready for her early shift at the dental office. Mom, can I talk to you about something? Make it quick. I need to leave in 10 minutes. I took a breath, tried to find the words. Marcus makes me uncomfortable sometimes. The way he looks at me, the things he says. She cut me off before I could finish, slamming her coffee mug down on the counter hard enough that I flinched. Don't start, Maya. Don't you start with this. I'm just saying, I know what you're saying. And I'm telling you to stop. I finally have something good. Finally have a man who treats me decent and helps with bills and doesn't leave. And you want to ruin it with your teenage drama. It's not drama, Mom. He makes me feel, he's a good man. He's never touched you, has he? Never actually done anything? No, but, then what's the problem? You just don't like him because he's not your father. Well, guess what? Your father's gone. He left. And Marcus is here. So you better figure out how to deal with it. I'm just trying to tell you how I feel, and I'm trying to tell you that your feelings aren't the only ones that matter. I've sacrificed everything for you, Maya. Everything. I work 2 jobs. I keep a roof over your head. And the one time I find some happiness, you want to take it away from me. Is that what this is? You can't stand to see me happy? That's not what I have to go to work. She grabbed her purse and keys. We're done with this conversation. Marcus stays. And you better adjust your attitude. She left. I stood in the kitchen, shaking, understanding that I'd just learned another lesson about what it meant to be grown. It meant protecting yourself because nobody else would. It meant keeping your mouth shut about things that made you uncomfortable because your discomfort didn't matter as much as other people's convenience. It meant being alone even when people were all around you. I started spending even more time away from home. The library became my sanctuary. It was open until 8 on weeknights, and I'd stay there doing homework, reading, anything to avoid going back to the apartment. I joined the drama club even though I hated being on stage. Joined the yearbook committee. Volunteered to help clean up after school events. Anything. Everything. My teachers praised my involvement. Maya's so dedicated. So eager to participate. I wasn't dedicated. I was hiding. At night, when I finally had to go home, I'd time my arrival for when I knew Mom would be there, when Marcus would hopefully be busy with other things. I'd go straight to my room, lock my door, and try to become invisible. I taught myself to move silently through the apartment. To use the bathroom when nobody else was up. To grab food and retreat before anyone noticed I was there. I became a ghost in my own life. The real breaking point, the moment when whatever fragile thing was left of my childhood shattered completely, came about 4 months after Marcus moved in. I was sick. Really, genuinely sick. Not just a cold or a sore throat, but a fever of 103 and chills that made my whole body shake and vomiting that left me weak and dizzy. The kind of sick where a child desperately needs a parent to take care of them, to bring them water and check their temperature and tell them it's going to be okay. I'd been sick for 2 days, had missed school, had barely left my bed. Mom knew. She'd stuck her head in my room once, felt my forehead, said you're fine, just the flu, and left again. By the 3rd night, I was getting worse instead of better. Could barely stand up without the room spinning. Couldn't keep down even water. Was so cold I was shivering under 3 blankets. I needed help. Real help. I forced myself out of bed, wrapped myself in a blanket, and shuffled out to the living room where Mom and Marcus were watching some action movie at full volume. "Mom," I croaked. My voice sounded like I'd swallowed gravel. "I think I need to go to the doctor. I feel really bad." She barely glanced at me. "You're fine. It's just the flu. It has to run its course. But I can't stop throwing up. And my fever keeps going higher. I think maybe I should, Maya." Her voice was sharp, annoyed. "You're fine. It's a virus. There's nothing a doctor can do for a virus anyway except tell you to rest and drink fluids. So go do that." "I can't keep down fluids. I tried and I just threw it all up again. And I'm so dizzy I can barely stand and, oh my God." She turned to look at me fully for the first time, and the expression on her face wasn't concern. It was irritation. Pure irritation that I was interrupting her evening. "You're being dramatic. You're 13 years old. You're not dying. Go back to bed and stop bothering me." Marcus snorted from his end of the couch. "Teenagers. Everything's a crisis with them." "I'm not trying to be dramatic," I said, tears starting to leak from my eyes. "I'm really sick. I'm scared." "I just need, what you need," Mom interrupted, standing up from the couch, "is to toughen up. You think I can run to the doctor every time I feel bad? You think I have money for urgent care visits for the flu? You're grown, Maya. Handle it." There was that word again. Grown. The word that meant I wasn't allowed to need anything. Wasn't allowed to be sick or scared or young. But Mom, go. To bed. Each word was its own sentence, sharp and final. "We're trying to watch a movie. I don't want to hear another word about this." I stood there swaying, wrapped in my blanket, looking at my mother's face and seeing nothing there but annoyance at my existence. Not worry. Not love. Not even basic human compassion. Just irritation that I'd interrupted her evening with my boyfriend. I stumbled back to my room and collapsed on the bed. Pulled the blankets over my head and cried. Until I couldn't cry anymore. The fever broke 3 days later. I don't know how. My body just fought it off on its own, the way bodies sometimes do. I survived without medical intervention, without parental care, without anything except my own will to live. I missed a week of school. Nobody from home called to check on me except my English teacher, Mrs. Richardson. She called the apartment 6 times according to our answering machine. Mom never called her back. When I finally went back to school, weak and shaky and having lost almost 10 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, Mrs. Richardson pulled me aside immediately. "Maya, I called your house 7 times. 7. Nobody answered. Nobody called me back. What's going on? Are you okay?" I looked at this woman who'd actually noticed I was gone, who'd cared enough to call, who was maybe the only adult in my life paying any attention at all. I opened my mouth to tell her the truth. To say that I'd been dangerously sick and my mother hadn't cared. That I'd been raising myself for months. That I needed help. But the words stuck in my throat. Years of being told I was grown, of being forced to handle everything myself, of learning that needing help was weakness, had rewired my brain. Asking for assistance felt impossible. Admitting I needed anyone felt like failure. "We had a family emergency," I heard myself say. The lie came out smooth and practiced. "Everything's fine now. I'm sorry for worrying you." Mrs. Richardson's eyes searched my face. She didn't believe me. I could see that clearly. But what could she do? I was giving her the official story, denying any problem. "Maya, if you ever need to talk about anything, you can come to me. You know that, right?" "I know. Thank you." And if things aren't okay at home, there are resources. People who can help. You don't have to handle everything alone. I know. But really, everything's fine. She let me go, but the concern in her eyes stayed with me for days. After that, I stopped hoping. Stopped waiting for Mom to suddenly transform back into a parent. Stopped looking for rescue from any direction. I was on my own. Completely, utterly alone. And the sooner I accepted that, the sooner I could figure out how to survive it. I became hyper-independent in ways that would take me years to unpack in therapy. At 14, I got a job. It wasn't legal, not really. I was too young for working papers, didn't have the parental signatures required. But the small grocery store on the corner needed help and the owner, Mr. Kim, didn't ask too many questions. He paid me under the table, $6 an hour for stocking shelves and bagging groceries and sweeping floors. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Money I earned that nobody could take from me. I worked 15 hours a week after school and on weekends. Saved every penny I could. Finally had money for food that wasn't the cheapest option. Could buy myself clothes when I needed them. Could afford the little things that made life bearable. Mr. Kim was kind in a gruff way. Would sometimes slip me extra food that was close to expiration, stuff the store would throw out anyway. For you, he'd say, handing me a bag of day-old bread or bruised apples or dented cans. Take home. Thank you, Mr. Kim. He'd nod and go back to work, never asking why a 14-year-old needed free groceries, never commenting on the fact that I was clearly raising myself. Some adults see what they want to see. Some see the truth and pretend not to. And a very few, like Mr. Kim, see the truth and help in small ways without making it into a thing. I was grateful for him. For those bags of almost expired food. For the steady paycheck. For the routine and structure and sense of purpose. Work became my escape, even more than school. At the store, I had a role. Had tasks to complete. Had value in a way I didn't at home. At home, I was furniture. At work, I was an employee. It was better. School became a mixed bag. My grades were still good, excellent even. Straight A's because studying was something I could control. Something I could excel at, something that was mine. But socially, I was struggling. How do you relate to kids your age when your life is nothing like theirs? My classmates would complain about their parents being too strict, too nosy, too involved. Would whine about having to be home for dinner or having to check in before going out or having their phone time limited. I'd listen and nod and offer sympathetic sounds while thinking about the silence waiting for me at home. The empty apartment where nobody cared when I came or went. The phone that never rang with a parent checking on me. You're so lucky, my friend Becca said once during lunch. Your mom lets you do whatever you want. Lucky. Right. Yeah, I said. Super lucky. My mom wants to know where I am every second. It's so annoying. I wish she'd just chill out like yours. I wanted to scream at her. Wanted to explain that my mom's chill wasn't trust or respect. It was neglect. It was not caring. It was the absence of love masquerading as freedom. But I just smiled and changed the subject. I started pulling away from friends. It was easier than pretending. Easier than maintaining the facade that my life was normal. Easier than watching their functional families and feeling the ache of what I didn't have. Becca noticed. You're being weird lately. Are you mad at me or something? No, just busy. Work and school and stuff. You work? Since when? Few months now. At Kim's Market. Oh. Cool. Well, do you want to hang out this weekend? We could go to the mall or see a movie or, I can't. I have to work. What about Sunday? I have homework. She looked hurt. I felt guilty. But I didn't know how to explain that hanging out felt impossible when I was barely hanging on. That normal teenage activities felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. That I was drowning in responsibilities while she was floating through a childhood I couldn't access anymore. We drifted apart. She found other friends. I told myself it was fine, I didn't need friends anyway, I was better off alone. Another lie I told myself to survive. At home, Marcus's presence became more oppressive. He'd been living with us for almost a year by then, had embedded himself in our lives like a tick. The comments about my body got more frequent. More explicit. Always when Mom wasn't around to hear. Damn, Maya. You're growing up nice. Bet the boys at school can't keep their eyes off you. You need a ride somewhere? I could take you. We could spend some time together. Get to know each other better. Your mama says you never bring boyfriends around. That's too bad. A girl who looks like you should be having fun. I started wearing exclusively baggy clothes. Sweatshirts in summer. Baggy jeans. Anything to hide my developing body from his gaze. I changed my schedule to avoid being alone with him ever. If Mom was working late and I knew he'd be home, I'd stay at the library until it closed. If she was gone for the weekend with him on some trip I wasn't invited on, I'd stay at the store helping Mr. Kim with inventory, sleeping in the back room if I had to. You don't have to stay, Mr. Kim would say. Store is closed. Go home. I like helping. And I could use the extra hours. He'd look at me with those knowing eyes but wouldn't push. Would just nod and let me stay, probably understanding more than he let on. I told myself I was being paranoid about Marcus. That he was just awkward, just didn't know how to talk to teenage girls, just making inappropriate comments but not actually dangerous. But my gut knew better. My gut screamed at me every time he came too close, every time his eyes lingered, every time he found an excuse to accidentally touch me in passing. I trusted my gut. Stayed away. Stayed safe. And hated myself for not being able to tell anyone, for not being able to make it stop, for being too scared and too alone and too grown to ask for help. 15 came and went without celebration. Mom forgot my birthday entirely. I bought myself a cupcake from the grocery store and ate it alone in my room. 16 arrived with slightly more fanfare, but only because I could get my driver's license. Except I couldn't. Because getting a license required a parent to sign off on driver's ed and take me to the DMV and be involved in a way Mom had no interest in being. I don't have time for that, she said when I asked. And we can't afford driver's ed anyway. I have money saved. I can pay for it myself. Then pay for it. But don't expect me to drive you around for practice or whatever. You're grown. You want a license, figure it out. I figured it out. Paid for driver's ed with money from my job. Had the instructor pick me up for lessons. Forged Mom's signature on the permission forms because what choice did I have? The day I passed my driving test, I called her to tell her. That's nice, baby, she said, distracted. I could hear Marcus in the background saying something I couldn't make out. Listen, I gotta go. Proud of you. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in the DMV parking lot with my brand new driver's license and nobody to celebrate with. Nobody to take the traditional photo with. Nobody who cared enough to mark this milestone. I was 16 years old and utterly alone. I bought myself a car a few months later. Saved every penny from work, bought a beat-up Honda from a guy on Craigslist for $800. It was old and ugly and the radio didn't work, but it was mine. Proof I could achieve things on my own. Having a car meant even more freedom to avoid home. I'd drive around aimlessly after work, burning gas I couldn't afford but needing the space and solitude. Would park at random places and sit there doing homework or reading or just existing somewhere that wasn't my room in an apartment where I wasn't wanted. Junior year of high school came with college preparation. SATs and ACTs and college visits and planning for the future. My school counselor, a new one named Ms. Chen, called me in to discuss my plans. Maya, your grades are excellent. Top of your class. You should be looking at competitive schools. Have you thought about where you want to apply? I'm thinking state schools mostly. Somewhere affordable. With your GPA and test scores, you could aim higher. What about Ivy League? What about out-of-state private schools? I need scholarships. Full scholarships. So state school makes more sense. She looked at me carefully. What about your parents? Can they contribute anything? I almost laughed. No. It'll have to be all scholarships or it won't happen. Okay. Then we'll make that work. I'll help you find scholarship opportunities. We'll make you such a strong applicant that schools will be fighting to give you money. And she did. Ms. Chen became my advocate in a way no adult had been before. She stayed after school to help me with applications. Edited my essays. Researched scholarships. Wrote recommendation letters that apparently made me sound like a miracle student. You've overcome so much, she said once while we were working on an essay prompt about challenges I'd faced. I hadn't told her much. Just that my family situation was complicated, that I was financially independent, that I'd been working since 14. I don't feel like I've overcome anything, I admitted. I just survived. Survival is overcoming, Maya. Especially when the odds are stacked against you. Maybe she was right. I applied to 12 schools. A mix of state universities and private schools known for generous financial aid. Spent my savings on application fees and test score reports, investing in my future because nobody else would. My personal essay was raw. Brutally honest in a way I'd never been before. I wrote about being told I was grown at 13. About raising myself while my mother checked out. About working to feed myself and learning to survive without support. About determination and resilience and the fierce independence born from having no other choice. Ms. Chen cried when she read it. This is powerful, Maya. Really powerful. Any admissions officer who reads this and doesn't accept you has no heart. I hoped she was right. The acceptances started coming in March of my senior year. One by one, emails and letters with good news. Accepted. 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 Full scholarship offers from state schools. Partial scholarships from private schools. One full ride offer from a private university 3 hours away, covering tuition, room, board, books, everything. I'd done it. Against all odds, I'd done it. I was getting out. When I told Mom, her reaction was exactly what I'd learned to expect by then. She was in the kitchen making coffee, getting ready for her shift at the dental office. Marcus had already left for his construction job. Mom, I got into college. Full scholarship to Morrison University. She barely looked up from her phone. That's nice, honey. It's a really good school. And everything's covered. I'll be leaving in August. I'm excited. It's a fresh start, you know? New place, new people, new Maya. She finally looked at me, and the expression on her face was cool, distant. That's great. I'm happy for you. But you should know, once you leave, you're not coming back here. The words hit like a slap. What? I'm downsizing. Can't afford this 2-bedroom on my own anymore, and Marcus and I are looking at getting a place together. 1 bedroom. There won't be room for you. I stared at her. What if something happens? What if college doesn't work out and I need somewhere to go? She shrugged, actually shrugged, like we were discussing something trivial. You'll figure it out. You always do. You're smart, resourceful. You'll be fine. Mom, I'm 17 years old, you'll be 18 in a few weeks. Grown. Legal adult. Time to start your own life anyway, isn't it? Isn't that what you wanted? To get out of here? I did want out. Desperately. But I'd still unconsciously assumed home would be there if I needed it. Still thought there was some minimal safety net, however threadbare. What if I get sick? What if I need help? What if, Maya, stop being dramatic? You're going to college on a full scholarship. You're obviously capable of handling yourself. And honestly, it's time for me to start living my own life too. I've been a single mom for 15 years. I've sacrificed everything. I deserve to think about what I want now. What she wanted. What she'd always wanted. Which was a life without me in it. Right, I said. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Okay. I'll figure it out. I knew you'd understand. You're so mature, Maya. So grown up. There was that word again. The word that had defined and destroyed my childhood. Grown. I went to my room and closed the door quietly. Sat on my bed in the small space I'd called home for as long as I could remember. Looked around at the posters and books and little pieces of myself scattered around. And finally, after 3.5 years of holding it together, I broke. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Mom and Marcus couldn't know I was hurt because my hurt didn't matter to them. But quietly, privately, I let myself shatter. I cried for hours. For the childhood I'd lost. For the mother I'd never really had. For the 13-year-old girl who'd been slapped and told she was grown and had spent years trying to live up to that impossible expectation. I cried for all the times I'd been hungry. All the times I'd been scared. All the times I'd needed someone and there was nobody there. I cried until there were no tears left, until I was empty and exhausted and raw. Then I picked myself up, washed my face, and started planning. If I truly had nowhere to go, then I needed to make college work. Not just work, but succeed completely. Because failure wasn't an option anymore. Failure meant homelessness. Meant having nowhere to turn. Meant proving Mom right that I was capable of handling everything alone because I had to be. The summer before college was strange. I worked as many hours as Mr. Kim would give me, saving every penny for expenses my scholarship wouldn't cover. Worked on campus jobs I'd already secured for the fall. Avoided home as much as possible. Mom and Marcus moved out of our apartment in July, into a one-bedroom across town. They took most of the furniture, left me with a mattress on the floor and a few kitchen items until the lease ran out in August. I spent the last month alone in that apartment, living like a squatter in a space that had never really felt like home anyway. Marcus didn't say goodbye. Just took his stuff and left. Mom stopped by once, the day before I was leaving for college. Got everything packed, she asked, looking around my nearly empty room. Yeah. Good. Good. She shifted uncomfortably. So, I'm not great at goodbyes. But I want you to know I'm proud of you. You did good. I did good. Despite her. Because I had no choice. Thanks. And Maya, I know things weren't always easy between us. But I did my best. I hope you know that. Her best. Her best had been telling me I was grown at 13 and checking out of parenthood entirely. I know, I said, because what else could I say? Call me sometimes. Let me know how you're doing. Okay. She hugged me. It was brief, awkward, the embrace of strangers obligated by blood to pretend at affection. Then she left. I stood in my empty room and felt nothing. No sadness. No anger. No relief. Just emptiness. The next day, my friend Marcus, different Marcus, the one from school who'd been quietly supportive for the past few years, helped me move into my dorm. We'd stayed in touch throughout high school, had become close in that way of people who recognize brokenness in each other. He was going to a different school, but he'd driven to help me move because he understood that I had nobody else. You're really doing it, he said as we carried boxes up to my room. Getting out. Yeah. How does it feel? Terrifying. He laughed. Fair. But you're going to be okay. You've been okay through everything else. Okay isn't the same as good. No, he agreed. but it's something. And maybe at college, you can figure out what good looks like. My roommate was named Keisha. She was from a big family, had parents who'd driven 6 hours to drop her off, had siblings who'd come along to help move her in. Her room was full of photos and stuffed animals and decorations her mom had bought. She was loud and warm and immediately friendly. "Oh my God, hi. You must be Maya. I'm so excited to room with you. We're going to have the best year." I watched her family bustle around, her dad assembling her bed frame, her mom making her bed with new sheets, her siblings bickering over where to put her desk. This was what it looked like when parents actually cared. "Where's your family?" Keisha's mom asked kindly. "Do they need help unloading?" "They couldn't make it," I said. The lie was automatic. "Work stuff." "Oh, that's too bad. Well, if you need any help getting settled, just let us know." They stayed for hours, helping both of us unpack, taking photos, getting emotional about leaving Keisha. I excused myself and went to the bathroom to cry quietly where nobody could see. When I came back, Keisha's family was leaving. Her mom hugged her for a long time, told her how proud they were, made her promise to call every day. Then they were gone, and it was just Keisha and me in our new space. "Your family seems nice," I said. "They're crazy but I love them." "Do you have a big family?" "No. Just me and my mom. We're not super close." "Oh. I'm sorry. That must be hard." "It's fine. I'm used to it." She looked like she wanted to ask more but didn't. For that, I was grateful. College was freedom and terror in equal measure. For the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for anything except my own education. My scholarship covered meals, so I had reliable food for the first time since I was 12. I had a dorm room, small but mine. Had structure and support and resources I'd never had before. It should have been paradise. Instead, I was paralyzed. I didn't know how to just be a college student. Didn't know how to relax, make friends, enjoy my late teens. I'd skipped that entire developmental phase, gone straight from childhood to pseudo-adulthood without the transition. My brain was still in survival mode, constantly waiting for the next crisis, the next disaster, the next moment when everything would fall apart. Keisha noticed. Of course she noticed. She was observant and kind and genuinely wanted to be friends. "Why do you have so much food in your desk?" she asked one day, looking at the stash of granola bars and crackers and non-perishable items I'd hoarded there. "Just in case." "In case of what?" "We have a meal plan. The dining hall is always open." "I know. I just like having backup." She didn't understand. How could she? She'd never worried where her next meal was coming from. Had never had to make $20 last a week. Had never gone to bed hungry. She noticed I couldn't relax. That I was always tense, always waiting, always ready to handle the next emergency. "Maya, you seem stressed. Is everything okay?" "I'm fine." "Are you sure? Because you seem like you're waiting for something bad to happen." She wasn't wrong. I was waiting. For the scholarship to be revoked. For some hidden fee I couldn't pay. For the universe to punish me for daring to hope things could be better. Parents' weekend came in October. The campus filled with families, parents gushing over their kids, taking them to dinner, attending events together. Keisha's family came, of course. Took her to expensive restaurants. Bought her stuff she needed for her dorm. Attended the parents' activities. "Do you want to come to dinner with us?" she offered. "My parents would be happy to have you." The kindness in the offer made my throat tight. "That's okay. I have homework." "On parents' weekend?" "Come on, take a break." "Really, I'm fine. Thank you though." I spent the weekend alone in the library while everyone else had family time. Told myself it was fine. Told myself I preferred it this way. Told myself I didn't care that my mom hadn't called, hadn't asked if there was a parents' weekend, hadn't shown even the smallest interest in my new life. Monday, when Keisha came back full of stories about her weekend, I smiled and nodded and pretended it didn't hurt. "Your mom didn't come?" she finally asked. "She was busy. Work stuff." "That sucks." "I'm sorry." "It's fine. We're not really close anyway. I've noticed you never talk about her. Or your family at all." I shrugged, uncomfortable with the direction of conversation. "Not much to talk about." Keisha was quiet for a moment. Then, my RA mentioned that Student Health Services offers free counseling for students dealing with stuff. I thought maybe you'd want to know. "Why would I need counseling?" "I'm not saying you do. You seem like you're carrying a lot, you know? And talking to someone might help." "I'm fine." "Okay. But if you ever change your mind, it's there." I filed that information away and tried to forget about it. But it nagged at me. 2 weeks later, I looked up the Student Health Services website. Found the counseling section. Read about the free services available to students. Confidential counseling for students dealing with anxiety, depression, trauma, family issues, and life transitions. Family issues. That was one way to put it. I told myself I didn't need it. I was handling everything. I was fine. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that fine wasn't the same as healed. That surviving wasn't the same as thriving. That maybe, just maybe, I deserved more than just getting by. I made an appointment. That's where I'll tell you something important. If this story is resonating with you, if you've ever been the kid who had to raise yourself, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Let me know I'm not alone in sharing this, because what happened next, the therapy and the healing and the slow, painful work of becoming whole, that's where this story really begins. My first therapy appointment was with Dr. Williams. She was older, maybe late 50s, with kind eyes and a calm presence that immediately put me at ease and made me want to run simultaneously. "Tell me a bit about yourself, Maya. What brings you here today?" I'd practiced what I'd say. Had planned to give a sanitized version. "Just stress about school, maybe. Adjustment issues. Something small and manageable." Instead, I opened my mouth and everything poured out. When I was 13, my mom slapped me and told me I was grown, and she basically stopped being my parent after that, and I've been raising myself ever since, and I don't know how to be a normal college student because I never got to be a normal kid, and I'm so tired of pretending I'm okay when I'm not, and I don't even know what okay is supposed to feel like anymore. It all came out in one breathless rush, years of silence breaking open like a dam. Dr. Williams just listened. Didn't interrupt, didn't look shocked, didn't judge. When I finally stopped talking, she handed me a tissue and waited while I cried. "Maya," she said gently when I'd collected myself somewhat, "what you just described is called parentification and emotional neglect. It's a form of childhood abuse." The word hit me like a physical blow. Abuse? Yes. Abuse doesn't always mean physical violence. Neglecting a child's emotional and physical needs, forcing a child to take on adult responsibilities, making a child responsible for their own survival, these are all forms of abuse. But she didn't really hit me. Just that one time. And I had food and a place to live, and having basic shelter doesn't negate emotional abuse and neglect. What you described, being told you were grown at 13, being expected to raise yourself, being left without support or guidance, that's serious harm. I sat with that. Tried to wrap my mind around it. Abuse. Victim. Survivor. These words felt too big for my experience. They belonged to people with worse stories, didn't they? Not me. Not the girl who'd just figured things out, who'd been strong, who'd survived. "I don't feel like a victim," I said quietly. "You don't have to identify with that word. But acknowledging what happened to you, naming it for what it was, that's the first step toward healing from it." Healing. I hadn't even realized I needed healing. I'd been so focused on surviving that I'd never considered what came after survival. That first session turned into weekly sessions. Then twice-weekly sessions when Dr. Williams realized how much there was to unpack. We talked about parentification, how my mother had reversed our roles, made me her emotional support and her own support system while she provided nothing in return. We talked about the slap and the word grown and how that moment had redefined my entire childhood. We talked about Marcus, my mother's boyfriend, and the uncomfortable comments and looks. Dr. Williams used words like sexual harassment and predatory behavior that made me realize it had been even worse than I'd let myself acknowledge. We talked about my hyper-independence, how I'd learned that asking for help was dangerous, that needing people meant getting hurt. We talked about food insecurity and how it had wired my brain to hoard and fear scarcity even when I had plenty. We talked about my relationship with my mother and the concept of ambiguous loss, grieving someone who's still alive but functionally absent. It was brutal work. Some sessions I just cried for the full hour. Some I raged, finally letting myself be angry at what had been done to me. Some I sat in numb silence, unable to process the weight of it all. But slowly, something started to shift. I began to see that my strength wasn't a gift. It was a scar. A coping mechanism born from necessity, not choice. I began to understand that being told I was mature and independent and capable so young wasn't a compliment. It was evidence of trauma. I began to recognize that the little girl who'd been slapped and abandoned at 13 deserved to grieve what she'd lost. "What did you lose?" Dr. Williams asked me in one session. "My childhood," I said. "The chance to be a kid. To be taken care of. To not have to worry about where my next meal was coming from or whether the bills would be paid or whether I was safe. To just be young." "Yes. You lost all of that. And that loss is worth grieving." So I grieved. I grieved the mother-daughter relationship I should have had. The parent who should have protected me. The childhood that should have been mine. I grieved the 13-year-old who'd stood in that kitchen with a burning cheek and a permission slip and a heart breaking in ways she didn't understand. I grieved the years of hunger and fear and loneliness. And slowly, painfully, I started to heal. By the end of freshman year, I was different. Not fixed. Dr. Williams was clear that healing wasn't linear and trauma doesn't just disappear. But better. More aware. More able to identify my patterns and challenge them. I was learning to ask for help. Small things at first. Borrowing notes when I missed class. Asking Keisha to wake me up for an exam. Telling my professors when I was struggling. It felt terrifying every time. My brain screamed that needing help made me weak, made me a burden, made me at risk of abandonment. But I did it anyway. And people helped. And nobody abandoned me. I was learning to accept care. Keisha would offer me food from care packages her mom sent, and instead of automatically refusing, I'd say thank you and accept it. Marcus, my friend Marcus, would check in on me, and instead of saying I was fine, I'd tell him the truth sometimes. "I'm having a hard day. College is harder than I expected. I'm lonely." And he'd say, "That's valid. Want to get coffee and talk about it?" And I'd say yes. I was learning that vulnerability wasn't weakness. That letting people see my struggles didn't mean they'd use them against me. These lessons felt revolutionary after years of hiding everything. Sophomore year, I started making real friends. Not just Keisha, though she remained my closest friend. But a small circle of people who I let in past my walls. I went to parties occasionally. Learned to enjoy things without constantly waiting for them to be taken away. I started dating. Nothing serious, but I was learning how to be close to people, how to trust, how to let someone care about me without panicking. My first real relationship was with a guy named Tyler. He was sweet, patient, understanding when I explained that I had trust issues and needed to take things slow. We dated for 6 months before I felt comfortable enough to tell him about my childhood. We were lying in his dorm room, just talking, when he asked about my family. I don't really have one, I said. I mean, I have a mom, but we're not close. How come? And I told him. An edited version, but more honest than I'd been with anyone except Dr. Williams. I told him about being told I was grown at 13. About raising myself. About the hunger and the fear and the loneliness. He listened without interrupting, his hand holding mine. When I finished, he just said, "I'm so sorry. You deserved so much better than that." I started crying. Because he was right. I had deserved better. And for the first time, I was letting myself fully feel that truth. We broke up eventually, amicably, because we were young and growing in different directions. But he taught me that I could be loved even with all my damage. That my past didn't make me unworthy of care. By junior year, I was thriving academically. Double major in psychology and social work, because I'd decided I wanted to help kids in situations like mine. Wanted to be the adult who noticed, who cared, who fought for children being neglected. My professors loved me. I was passionate, dedicated, insightful in ways that came from lived experience. "You're going to make an incredible social worker," my practicum supervisor told me. "You have a natural empathy for kids in tough situations." I was one of those kids, I admitted. I figured. The best advocates usually have personal experience. Just make sure you're taking care of yourself too. This work can be triggering. I was taking care of myself. Therapy. Weekly. Good friends. Healthy routines. I was learning that self-care wasn't selfish, it was necessary. Then Mom called. It was October of my junior year. I was in my off-campus apartment, the one I shared with Keisha and 2 other girls, studying for a midterm. My phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in almost 3 years. I stared at it, heart pounding, debating whether to answer. Part of me wanted to ignore it. To let it go to voicemail. To maintain the distance I'd worked so hard to establish. But another part, the part that was still that 13-year-old girl hoping her mom would come back for her, that part made me answer. "Hello? Maya?" Her voice was different. Smaller. Less sharp. "It's your mother." "I know." Silence stretched between us, heavy with years of abandonment and hurt. "I'm sick," she finally said. "Cancer. They found it a few months ago. Stage 3. It's not good." My first instinct was to ask if she was okay, to offer comfort, to be the caretaker I'd always been forced to be. But therapy had taught me to pause. To check in with myself before responding. How did I feel? Sad. Angry. Numb. Confused. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, because it was true. I didn't wish illness on anyone, even her. "The doctors say I need help. Someone to take me to appointments, to be there for treatments. And I don't have anyone else." Of course she didn't. She'd alienated everyone with her selfishness, and now she was alone. "You want me to take care of you," I said flatly. "I'm your mother, Maya." The audacity of it. After years of not being my mother in any way that mattered, she was claiming that title now because she needed something. "Are you?" The words came out cold. Because I don't remember much mothering. I remember being told I was grown at 13. I remember raising myself while you dated men and ignored me. I remember being sick with a fever of 103 and you not even taking me to the doctor. I remember you telling me not to come back after I left for college. So tell me, Mom, when exactly were you my mother? She was quiet for a long moment. I could hear her breathing, could imagine her processing this version of me she'd never met. The version who'd found her voice. "I wasn't a good mother," she finally admitted. "I know that. I was drowning and I took it out on you and that wasn't fair. But Maya, I'm dying. I have maybe a year, maybe less. And I don't want to die alone with my daughter hating me." The manipulation was transparent, but underneath it I heard something genuine. Fear. Regret. Desperation. I don't hate you, I said, and realized it was true. Hate required energy I'd stopped spending on her years ago. I don't feel much of anything about you anymore. You made sure of that. Then what do I have to do? Tell me what I need to do to make this right. Make it right. Like 13 years of neglect could be fixed with a conversation. I don't know. I need time to think about this. How much time? I don't know. I'll call you when I've decided. Maya, I have to go. I'll call you. I hung up before she could say more. Then I sat on my bed, phone in my hand, and started shaking. Keisha found me like that an hour later. Maya? What's wrong? And I told her. Told her everything I'd never fully told her before. About my childhood, about my mother, about the phone call. She sat beside me and listened, and when I was done, she just hugged me while I cried. What are you going to do? She asked when I'd cried myself out. I don't know. Part of me wants to tell her to handle it herself like she made me handle everything. But another part feels guilty. She's dying. She's my mother. What kind of person refuses to help their dying mother? The kind who was abandoned by that mother for 13 years. Maya, you don't owe her anything. Not after what she put you through. I know. Logically, I know that. But it doesn't feel that simple. No. It's never simple with family. I called Dr. Williams and asked for an emergency session. She fit me in the next day. She wants you to take care of her. Dr. Williams said after I'd explained the situation. The woman who never took care of you wants you to take care of her. How does that make you feel? Angry. Bitter. Also guilty. She's dying. She's my mother. Shouldn't I help? Maya, you're not responsible for her. You were never responsible for her, even when she made you think you were. Whatever you decide about this, it needs to be for you, not out of guilt or obligation. What if I want to see her? What if I want answers? Closure? Something? Then you can explore that. On your terms, with boundaries. You can decide to have contact without becoming her caretaker. You can get the answers you need without sacrificing yourself again. On my terms. With boundaries. Those words became my mantra. I didn't decide right away. Took a month to process, to think, to figure out what I actually wanted. What I wanted, I realized, was understanding. I wanted to know why. Why she'd abandoned me. Why she'd been so cruel. Why she'd failed so completely at the one job she'd chosen when she decided to have me. I didn't expect an apology, though I wanted one. Didn't expect redemption or reconciliation. But I wanted to look her in the eye and ask the questions that had haunted me for 13 years. I called her back. I'll visit, I said. But there are conditions. Okay. Her voice was eager, desperate. I'm not your caretaker. I'm not moving back. I'm not managing your medical care. I'll visit when I can, but I'm not dropping my life for yours. I understand. And we're going to talk. Really talk. About what happened. About why you did what you did. I need answers. Silence. Then, I'll try. Trying isn't enough. If you want me in your life, even for visits, you owe me honesty. Real honesty. Okay. Yes. I can do that. 2 weeks later, I drove to the small apartment she was living in. It was in a rundown complex, smaller and shabbier than anywhere we'd lived when I was growing up. She opened the door and I barely recognized her. Cancer had ravaged her. She was thin, fragile, her skin gray, her hair mostly gone. She looked old, ancient, though she was only 51. Maya. Her voice cracked. You came. I said I would. She stepped aside to let me in. The apartment was cluttered, dirty, the home of someone who'd given up on maintaining appearances or maybe just didn't have the energy anymore. I know it's a mess, she said, following my gaze. I can't do much these days. The treatment wipes me out. I didn't respond. Just sat on the couch and waited. She sat across from me in a worn armchair, hands folded in her lap, looking terrified. Good, I thought. Then felt guilty for thinking it. You wanted to talk, she finally said. So talk. All the questions I'd rehearsed fled my mind. What came out was raw and unfiltered. Why? The word burst from me. Why did you do it? Why did you stop being my mother? Why did you tell a 13-year-old she was grown and then abandon her for the next 5 years? She looked at her hands. I don't have a good answer. Try. I was drowning, she said slowly. Your father left me with nothing. I was alone with a child I wasn't ready for. I worked 2 jobs and there was never enough money, never enough time, never enough of me to go around. And you were so smart, so capable. It was easier to lean on you than to keep pretending I had everything together. Easier for you. Yes. Easier for me. She looked up, met my eyes. I told myself you were fine. That you were handling it. That making you grow up fast was preparing you for the real world, teaching you to be strong. I was a child. I needed a mother, not boot camp. I know. I know that now. I knew it then too, somewhere deep down. But I couldn't face it. Couldn't face what I was doing to you. So I convinced myself it was okay. It wasn't okay. I was hungry. I was scared. I was alone. And you were right there, choosing not to see it. I know. Do you? Because from where I sat, you didn't care. You had your boyfriends and your drama and I was just furniture in the background. Her face crumpled. I cared. I just didn't know how to show it. Didn't know how to be what you needed. My own mother was the same way with me, you know. Cold, distant, made me figure everything out myself. I swore I'd be different with my kid, but I wasn't. I was exactly the same. Generational trauma. Dr. Williams had talked about this. How abuse and neglect get passed down unless someone consciously breaks the cycle. I was breaking it. Whatever else happened, I was making sure this pattern ended with me. You let Marcus move in, I said, my voice hard. And he made comments about my body. Looked at me in ways that made my skin crawl. And when I tried to tell you, you called it teenage drama and told me to deal with it. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't want to see it. Marcus was bad news, I know that now. I knew it then. But I was so desperate not to be alone that I ignored everything. Including the fact that my daughter felt unsafe in her own home. You chose him over me. Yes. The admission was quiet but clear. I chose my own comfort over your safety. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. However long that is. We sat in heavy silence. I can't undo it, she finally continued. Can't take back any of it. Can't give you back your childhood or make up for all the times I failed you. And I know sorry doesn't fix anything. But I am sorry. I'm sorry for every time I chose myself over you. Every time I made you feel like you were a burden instead of my daughter. Every time I called you grown when you were still my little girl who needed her mother. Tears were streaming down both our faces now. I needed you so badly, I said, my voice breaking. I needed my mom and you were right there and you still let me fall. I know. I was sick with a fever of 103 and you wouldn't even take me to the doctor because you were watching a movie with your boyfriend. I know. I went to bed hungry more times than I can count because you left me with $20 for a week of groceries. I know. You forgot my birthday. Multiple years. I know. Do you? The anger finally broke through completely. Do you actually understand what you did to me? Do you have any idea what it's like to be 13 and completely alone? To walk through high school with no one in your corner? To get into college and realize you have nowhere to come back to because your own mother doesn't want you anymore? Do you? No, she admitted. I can't imagine it. And I hate myself for putting you through it. For being so weak and selfish that I sacrificed my child's well-being for my own convenience. Hating yourself doesn't help me. I know. Nothing helps you. Nothing can make this right. But Maya, if I have any time left, I want to spend it trying to be better. Not as your mother, I know it's too late for that. But as a person. I want to apologize properly. I want to answer your questions. I want to give you whatever closure I can before I die. I looked at this broken woman who'd broken me. Saw the fear and regret and genuine remorse in her eyes. Saw the ghost of who she might have been if she'd been stronger, healthier, better. I don't forgive you, I said clearly. I don't know if I ever will. And I'm not taking care of you. I'm not becoming your nurse or your caretaker or your emotional support. I've spent enough of my life taking care of you. I understand. But I'm willing to visit sometimes. To talk. To see if there's anything worth salvaging in our relationship before you die. That's all I can offer. That's more than I deserve. Yes. It is. I visited her once a month for the next 8 months. Each visit, we talked more. She told me about her own childhood, about the mother who'd been cold and neglectful, about the generational pattern of emotional abandonment. She told me about my father, how he'd been charming and abusive, how he'd drained her savings and her hope before disappearing. None of it excused what she'd done to me. But it helped me understand. Understanding, Dr. Williams told me, was different from forgiveness. I could understand why someone hurt me without absolving them of responsibility. And understanding did bring a kind of freedom. Not the freedom of reconciliation, but the freedom of context. Of seeing her as a full person, flawed and broken, instead of just the monster who'd ruined my childhood. She started acknowledging things she'd never admitted before. How she'd parentified me. How she'd neglected me emotionally and physically. How she'd put her own needs ahead of mine consistently for years. I see it now, she said during one visit. How I made you my parent instead of being yours. How I used you for emotional support while giving you nothing in return. I robbed you of your childhood and convinced myself I was teaching you independence. You were teaching me that I couldn't depend on anyone, I corrected. That needing help was weakness. That I was only valuable as long as I was useful. God, Maya. I'm so sorry. The apologies kept coming. Each visit brought more. More acknowledgement of harm. More ownership of her failures. More genuine remorse. It didn't fix anything. But it mattered. She asked about my life. Really asked, actually listened to the answers. Wanted to know about school, about my friends, about my plans for the future. You're going to be a social worker? She asked during one visit. Yes. I want to help kids in situations like mine. Kids being neglected or parentified or forced to grow up too fast. You'll be good at that. You understand in a way people who haven't lived it can't. I know. That's the only good thing that came from my childhood. I can use my experience to help others. She was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you. I know I don't have the right to be, but I am. You survived everything I put you through and you're not just surviving anymore. You're thriving. You're going to help people. You're breaking the cycle I couldn't break. The words meant something, even though I wasn't ready to fully accept them. By the 7th month, she was in hospice. The cancer had spread, and the doctors said she had weeks, maybe days. I visited her there. The hospice room was small but peaceful, with windows overlooking a garden. She looked tiny in the bed, barely there anymore. I'm scared, she admitted. Of dying. Of what comes after. Of leaving things unfinished. What things? Us. You. Making things right with you. You've done what you can, I said. You've apologized. You've explained. You've owned your mistakes. That's more than I expected. It's not enough. No. But it's something. She reached for my hand. I let her take it. Maya, I need you to know something. You didn't deserve any of what I did to you. None of it was your fault. You were a child. A beautiful, bright, wonderful child who deserved a mother who could love her properly. And I couldn't. But that was my failing, not yours. I started crying. I know. Therapy's helped me understand that. Good. I'm glad you're in therapy. I'm glad you're getting help I never got, never even tried to get. Promise me something? What? Promise me you'll keep healing. That you won't let what I did define your whole life. That you'll build something beautiful despite me, not because of me. I promise. And promise me you'll be the mother I wasn't, if you ever have kids. Break the cycle. Don't pass this down. I promise. She squeezed my hand weakly. I love you. I don't know if you believe that, but I do. I always did. I just didn't know how to show it. I believe you, I said. And I did. Loving someone and hurting them aren't mutually exclusive. She'd loved me in her broken way while simultaneously destroying me. I'm sorry, she whispered. For all of it. I'm so sorry. I know. She died 3 days later. I was there, holding her hand, watching her take her last breaths. And I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Grief for the mother I'd never really had. Relief that the painful chapter was finally closing. Sadness for the relationship we could have had in a different life. Peace that we'd at least found some understanding before the end. The funeral was small. Just me, Marcus my friend who drove up to support me, and a few people from her work who barely knew her. I didn't cry during the service. I'd already cried everything I needed to cry. After, standing at her grave, I said goodbye to the mother who'd told me I was grown at 13 and spent the rest of my childhood proving she meant it. I survived you, I said quietly. And I'm going to do more than survive. I'm going to thrive. I'm going to help other kids who are going through what you put me through. I'm going to break the cycle you couldn't. And that's my victory. Not forgiving you. Not even understanding you. Just becoming someone better despite you. I turned and walked away from her grave and toward the life I was building. A life that was mine. I'm 26 now. It's been 2 years since Mom died. And I want to tell you about what came after, because the healing didn't stop when she died. In some ways, it accelerated. I graduated college with honors. Got accepted into a master's program for clinical social work with a full scholarship. Started working at a nonprofit that helps kids in foster care and at-risk youth. And I found my calling. Every day, I work with kids who remind me of myself. Kids being parentified. Kids raising themselves. Kids who've been told they're grown when they're still children. I see the signs I wish someone had seen in me. The hyper-independence. The hoarding of food. The inability to ask for help. The walls built so high nothing can get through. And I help them. Not by fixing them, but by seeing them. By acknowledging what's happening. By being the adult who notices, who cares, who fights for them. You're not responsible for the adults in your life, I tell them. You're allowed to be a kid. You're allowed to need help. You're allowed to not have all the answers. Some of them believe me. Some don't, not yet. But I plant the seed. I show up consistently. I prove through actions that adults can be trustworthy, can be supportive, can be safe. It's hard work. Emotionally draining work. I go home some nights and cry for the kids I'm trying to help and for the kid I used to be. But it's meaningful. It matters. My supervisor, an older social worker named Patricia, pulled me aside after I'd been there 6 months. "You're doing incredible work, Maya. These kids trust you in a way they don't trust other staff. You have a gift." "It's not a gift. It's experience." "That too. But you're using your pain to help others. That takes strength most people don't have." "I'm still in therapy. Probably always will be. Dr. Williams and I meet every other week now instead of weekly, but she's still my anchor when things get hard. We've moved from processing my childhood to working on my present and future. On building healthy relationships. On allowing myself to be vulnerable. On recognizing that my worth isn't tied to my productivity or usefulness."